Hey everyone, this is Christian Heimel, host of Caught Listening. Thanks for listening to the following podcast on Public House Media.
Shepherd revolution. Shepherd revolution. Shepherd revolution. Shepherd revolution.
Hey, it's David, and welcome to the Shepherd Revolution podcast. I'm so excited that you're here today. This is a very new podcast, and we're doing a new series alert. In this series, we're going to be talking about teaching to change lives. Clearly, I messed that one up. It's so new. At the end of 2020, I went on a spiritual vacation. And for those of you who are probably in the church world, it's called a sabbatical. And I had time to reflect on what I wanted my word for 2021 to be. And the word was restoration, which actually means to bring back to original design, revive. It's life-giving. It's renewing. And that is the word for 2021, restoration. And it continued to lead into this podcast series. Like, what do we need to restore? You know, we've lost so much in 2020. And I think in the education world, we've lost teaching to change lives versus teaching just to survive. And this series is for parents, teachers, pastors, leaders, coach, mentors. If you lead anyone, you need this, because it's important to teach to change lives, but more importantly, it's how we teach to change lives, right? And if you know somebody who's going to benefit from this podcast, share this podcast with them. I'm serious. Share this podcast with them. So let's jump into the overview, because I want to prime your mind for what's to come. In the overview of what we'll be talking about throughout this series is, number one, the law of the teacher. The law of a teacher simply means if you stop growing today, you stop teaching tomorrow. Say what? I remember I was interviewing one of an educator in the Colorado Springs area, and he said something so powerful. He said, once you stop learning, you become useless. I was a little offended and taken back by it, but as I thought about it a little bit more, once you stop learning, you become useless. And I truly believe that when we're learning, we're growing, but more importantly, when we're learning, we're sharing what we're learning. It's natural, right? You know, you go to the movie theater and you eat popcorn, right? Especially if you're going on a date and you got a lot of popcorn, and what are you naturally going to do? You're going to share it. Unless you cheap and stingy, then you won't share it. But for the most part, you're going to share the popcorn because it's so much, it's salty, it's buttery, and you're thirsty. And I know a lot of people out there are thirsty. So quench your thirst. This is not sponsored by Sprite. Number two, we're going to talk about is the law of education. The law of education simply means the way people learn determines how you teach. So the Greek word for education means to draw from within. And oftentimes we look at education and we think about instilling in, but we've got it so backwards. What are we bringing out of each learner? What are we bringing out of our students? And the beauty is, it's like, you know, like planting a seed, right? Our job as educators, as parents, as leaders, the job is to nurture the seed. And what happens from that nurture, we draw within that seed, this beautiful plant. And that's education, is drawing that beautiful plant out of that seed. Next, we're going to be talking about the law of activity throughout this city. We're going to be talking about activity and how important it is. And activity is all about maximum involvement to achieve maximum learning. And oftentimes we're like, why aren't students as participant? Like, why are they not participating in this? Because they're not engaged, right? You can't teach somebody who's not engaged. So in order to engage the student in the learning, you have to include the student in the learning. It's so simple, right? But we mess it up. It's crazy. It's crazy. How did that happen? Number 4, we're going to talk about the law of communication. The law of communication simply means truly bringing it means, I messed that one up, but it means speaking in ways that create bridges instead of islands. And oftentimes in our communication, it can create silos. It's me versus them. It's very destructive language versus empowering language. So as educators, how are we empowering our learners and and students through our words, and even ourselves? Like, we would not accept anybody speaking any harsh stuff towards us, but we speak those same things towards ourselves. It's just like, it's asinine. I don't understand it. I don't get it. But the law of communication is something that we're going to be covering. Number 5, one of my favorite, the law of the heart. And this is the heart of teaching, right? It's not just head knowledge, but it's heart knowledge. And it's one thing to know something. It's another thing to experience something. It's another thing to feel something. And one way we learn is not just the conception of the information, but it's the experience of it, right? Something that I learned very quickly as a kid was not to put my hand on the stove. After my mom told me don't put my hand on the stove, I didn't believe her because I thought, she's older. She don't know what she's talking about. I got quick reflex. And then she was just finished cooking. Island parents, they take a long time to cook. And she took the pot off the stove. I put my hand on the stove and it burned me so bad. Like, I was crying. And my mom came back and she was like, that's good for you. You ever get those black mamas be like, that's good for you when you get hurt? Like, it's just like, I'm crying. I'm hurt. Save me, please. And that's why I went to therapy. Number 6, the law of encouragement. And encouragement is simply verbal affection, a verbal approval. It's the fuel that moves us. It's the thing that creates the hope. And how do we move from despair to fulfillment? It's one word. It's called hope. And hope comes from enough encouragement. And how are we encouraging our learners? Last but not least, the law of readiness. The law of readiness is creating the atmosphere of a heart and a mind and a body to receive information that leads to transformation. And it's fostering the mind, the heart, the body, the spirit. It's the whole student, not just half the students, the entire student. So these are the 7 laws that we're going to be covering over the course of this series. I am so excited about this series because I'm going to have random guests come on. They're going to share their expertise. They're going to share their hearts. They're going to share their passions. But more importantly, they're going to share experiences that will connect with you, the educator, you, the parent, you, the guide from the side, you, the sage from the stage. It's going to give you some things to reflect on. And I think in bouncing back from 2020, we have to do a lot more reflective work. Like, what is aligned to our long-term vision? How can we become better in our craft? And most importantly, what strategies are timeless that surpasses any pandemic, anything. It transcends time and it transcends space. So I want to shout out a couple of guests that we're going to have joining us. Is pretty awesome. I'm excited about this. Crystal Howell. Crystal's going to be joining us back. And if you were listening to the Leadership Revolution on Where Do We Go From Here, Crystal is a former teacher who's now an administrator leading a school into the future. She's a good friend who will be joining us from time to time doing some co-hosting, and she just have a love for learning. And then the second person, I already told him that he's coming on, Dr. Harrigan. If you listen to my TEDx, you already know Dr. Harrigan's in there. He is a longtime mentor. He is literally the guy who changed the course of history in my life. Like, I was going down the path of drug violence, gangs, all that stuff, and he showed me a better way. And he's an educator who is passionate about education. He's an adjunct professor. He's a principal, but more importantly, he's an innovator. So he's constantly looking for ways to change the game. And sometimes he gets a slap on the wrist because he pushes the envelope all the time. So those are the 7 laws that we're going to be covering throughout this series. These are some of the guests that we're going to be having on the show. And I want you to download the show right now and subscribe. And if you are enjoying what you're hearing, just like it's wetting your palate, it's like, I like this. Give me some more of this. If it's wetting your palate, I need you to share it with a friend, right? And I want to thank you so much for joining us on the Shepherd Revolution podcast. We hope that you're equipped, that you're powered, and we love to hear your ideas. Text the word revolution to 719-645-4177. Again, text the word revolution to 719-645-4177. Share your ideas and get a chance to get on the show. That'll be cool. You can get interviewed too. And every new episode will be released every other Wednesday. So stay tuned, subscribe, and share on social media. And I want you to remember something. Be the solution for the education evolution.
Shepherd, 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 shepherd revolution. Shepherd, 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 shepherd revolution.
Hey, it's David Prosper, and welcome to the Shepherd Revolution podcast, a show for educators, parents, and those out-of-the-box shepherd leaders doing education differently. I want to say thank you for leading the education evolution. We are bringing practical strategies, systems, and solutions to help you thrive as a revolutionary shepherd.
Shepherd, 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 shepherd